Morning to you. Welcome to my backyard. I just am getting settled into my new place in Pennsylvania here, and I don't have my office set up yet, so I figured why not do an episode from the backyard. Let you see the soybeans behind me, mountains back there, rivers in front of the house. It's pretty foggy this morning, so I had to wait quite a bit to get out here to record this, so sun got kind of bright, but here we are. We're doing it. This episode is part of our series we do every month called How Should Hunters Train? And this month happens to be August. So we're going to talk about how hunters ought to train in August. And it's getting to crunch time. It's not really crunch time, but it's almost go time, And that comes along with thinking about some specific things when it comes to your training and also, what your hunt is. You got to think about both of those things. And then we got to talk about the different, general aspects of hunting fitness that come into play during this part of the year. And so we're going to cover all that in this episode, from strength to mobility to conditioning, and all of the elements that we're going to have in our Backcountry Ready and also our Pathfinder programs this month. And some of the Pack Mule Elite members, I know you guys listen to this too, along with all of you guys that aren't members yet. And your stuff looks a little different. That's because there's a different level of individualization that goes into what you're doing. So you might be at a different point in the path when it comes to some of these things. And also, it depends on where you start and what you need. This is, even for some of our Backcountry Ready members, this is the general overview of like, hey, if you're a hunter, you followed the progression all year, this is what's going to be most impactful. This is what you ought to be doing right now. So got my notes and we're going to work through those. How about, if you don't mind, we'll start with strength. And one of the things that we need to look at with strength at this point, at the end of July, coming into this month, we've been working on kind of a strength maintenance phase, because we went heavy strength early in the year, transitioned that into general strength endurance in the spring. Lots of another quick phase of strength, then lots of strength endurance throughout the middle of the summer. Hit another maximal strength phase, kind of. We did some maximal relative strength work to bring that back around for ourselves towards the end of the last month into this month. And now it's time to look at strength endurance again, because that's mostly what we're going to need when we go out and we hunt. We need to be able to use our strength over time with repeated effort. And so that sandwich that kind of, I guess it would be just like a big damn sandwich that we create all year. Push the strength levels, turn it into strength endurance, push the strength levels, turn it into strength endurance, maintain the strength levels, and then build on the strength endurance. And that's where we're at in the progression. So that's what we're going to work on now. So you're going to get some of that from your pack work, of course. Pack work is a form of strength endurance training and muscular endurance training that's specific to what we do. So that absolutely counts as this work. And then, there's the different things that we're going to do in the gym to facilitate that as well. And so when you look at strength endurance, we look at it a couple different ways. We have things like eustress training, which is a heavier form of strength endurance. We have, believe it or not, some body weight work that is going to also facilitate strength endurance, just because you push the volume without fatigue. So we're going to get into that at this point in the year. And then also there's high intensity continuous training. We just did a lot of high intensity, some of us are still in the process of doing high intensity continuous training with step ups to build strength endurance and some aspects of muscular endurance as well, and to acclimate to heavy packs. And so as we go through that, we transition into, okay, now pack work needs to remain more specific, and we also need a break from doing the heavy step ups and things like that with our pack on. Some of our clients have gotten up to 80, 90 pounds with those step ups in their pack. And so we're going to take the stress back down from that. It's something I've talked about earlier in the year in articles and in podcasts about how like your heaviest pack work needs to start to taper off, use it through the middle of the summer. As we transition to the later aspects of the summer, we want to come back from that, bounce back from that a little bit, because we don't want to give our bodies too much stress. We don't want to beat the shit out of ourselves by putting heavy weight on our pack more than we need to. We need to get what we need out of it and then go on. And then we get into specific stuff. And if you look at what we mean from a specific aspect, and we'll talk about this more in conditioning, it's longer rucks with moderate weight. Because if you look at like what a day pack's going to be, hopefully if you're smart and you don't carry a bunch of shit that you don't need, probably in the 25-30 pound range, right? And for most people, that's not a super high percentage of their body weight. So if you're rucking for longer rucks with around 20 or 25% of your body weight, you're in what I kind of call the day pack plus range. So it's kind of splitting the difference between, hey, what might you have on a pack in or a pack out, which is likely going to be a little bit heavier, and then I'm getting attacked by moths or butterflies or something, and what you're going to have in a day pack. So we need to kind of split that difference, get the volume in, right? Because as we're looking now, whether you're going on day hunts, whether you have backpack hunts, whatever it might be, it is long walks with moderate to lightly heavy weight, and then hopefully the heavier weight of a pack out, right? And so we've done the work from a strength endurance standpoint to be ready for a heavy pack out. Now it's continuing to build volume. So from a strength endurance standpoint, we're bringing back some eustress training. We're also going to do some mostly unilateral training, and so that means one limb, one leg at a time, because it has more transfer to what we do in the mountains. So we use 2 leg movements like squats and deadlifts to push the strength levels. Then when we come into points like this, we need to transfer that to one limb for stability, and also just to build the specific strength and strength endurance that we need for movement in the mountains. One of the movements that we're going to introduce during this month is a combination of walking lunges and single leg RDLs. Because if you think about what it does for you, it's pretty much every aspect of uphill and downhill movement. You got the forward lunge part of it, which is deceleration, both for your hamstrings and your quads. That's downhill movement, Then you got the pull forward in the lunge aspect of it. So that'd be like stepping back into a reverse lunge and pulling yourself forward so that you have uphill drive. And then the single leg RDL aspect of it also trains an aspect of uphill drive. So doing combination movements like that to really start to transfer all of that into what we might experience uphill. Obviously, the rucking and everything like that is specific to it. But in the gym, those kind of movements are going to transfer over to uphill movements. Another thing we're going to make sure that we get in are some eccentric step downs, things like that, slow eccentrics, continue to build those quads like we've been working on, mostly all of the year, but specifically when it comes to downhill movement during the past few months. So those things are going to be a big focus from a strength standpoint. And eustress training, mostly, we're going to use a lot of unilateral movements with that as well. Something we did in the middle of the summer, we're bringing that back. And then, we have to think about putting everything in perspective based on what we need when it comes to proportions. So some of our strength sessions, they won't be quite as long as they were before, and we'll appropriate more time to conditioning. And so what we'll do is a lot of our strength sessions are going to start with a shorter conditioning session. Getting on the treadmill or the stair climber, going at a zone 1, zone 2 pace, then getting off there, doing the strength work, and because that way we have, it transfer over specifically. We build a little bit of fatigue, then we train the strength, and this is all gonna play into building more strength endurance because we're accessing our strength under at least a little bit of fatigue. At other parts of the year where you're really thinking developmentally, it would compete for resources. But at this point of the year, we're training for specific, and everything's kind of going to be a little bit mixed in the mountains, right? You're not you're not in the gym. So different demands, different things like that are going to mix. Hold on just one second. Hey, Ruth, get over here. Sorry, I had to yell at my dog. This is a informal podcast process today, guys. Sometimes when you got the dog in the backyard with you, you got to yell at her. So that's the main deal with that. So we're looking at strength endurance. We're going to do a little bit of conditioning beforehand. We're looking at unilateral stuff, and we're also remembering that our pack work contributes to building strength endurance and muscular endurance. Now, muscular endurance, what we're going to do for our backcountry ready folks is in week 4 of phase 3, before we go into phase 4, we're going to do a 10-minute step-up test. That's going to give us a good idea of where folks' muscular endurance is right now. Get a good picture of that. If it's in a good place, we're not going to worry about adding in more intensity when it comes to uphill work. If folks aren't where they need to be, we're going to have to address that. And so either through, including more intense step-up sessions during the workouts or uphill zone 3 work, we need to get their muscular endurance to the point where it needs to be. But we're going to individualize that based on the outcome of their step-up test. So that's one thing that we're going to look at from a muscular endurance standpoint. But those are the main goals. We're looking at strength endurance and muscular endurance at this point in the year. When it comes to conditioning, mostly we want specific stuff, right? So we just took a break from some of the specific stuff now, and just had long specific workouts on the weekends. But now we're going to bring in the specific work again, along with the long workouts on the weekends, so that we really have that final push towards the season. Another thing that we're going to add in at the end of strength workouts is during 1 session per week is a short VO2 max, set of VO2 max intervals. We're doing this for a couple reasons, to kind of help peak the conditioning, so you have access to some of your anaerobic parts of your energy system. You'll need them if you got to move fast uphill, if you got to have a good fast pace, all that kind of stuff. Also, one of the things that VO2 max training does for us is maximize cardiac output, which is the amount of blood your heart pumps out each minute. Doing this lowers the relative intensity of everything else. So when it comes to the VO2 max stuff, some of the anaerobic adaptations that you get from it I'm interested in, and the central adaptations, which means in your heart. Those are the main reasons. I'm not super concerned with pushing VO2 max for people. I think VO2 max is way oversold, not a great predictor of performance. And honestly, a lot of times as people get in better shape, their VO2 max actually decreases because they get more efficient at oxygen utilization, and so they don't need as much of it. So that's one thing we know from elite endurance folks. Am I saying that having a terrible VO2 max is okay? No. Am I super concerned with doing VO2 max training to push someone's VO2 max? No. If you do enough volume of aerobic work, your VO2 max will steadily increase. But I just think it gets oversold and overemphasized right now because it's an easy metric for people to push at. The problem is people are using watches and other wearables to measure their VO2 max, and they're bullshit. They don't really tell you what's going on. The only way to know your VO2 max is to go do the gas exchange test, which most people don't have access to, and so it's just not a metric that we worry too much about. But we're going to do that kind of to help us peak. Long aerobic ruck hike stuff on the weekends, we're talking getting up to 3 hours, stuff like that. This is also a great time of year to make sure that you're getting out on overnight trips, which would count for that, right? It's a specific training trip. I've gotten some in so far. I'm going to get a couple more in before I go to Montana to hunt. So you want to look at that as part of your conditioning plan, is getting out for long aerobic stuff on the weekend, overnight trips, all of that kind of stuff. And then it's really, getting your pack on also hiking, all of that kind of stuff, getting out and doing the specific stuff that we're going to do in the mountains. I know that a lot of folks, they they don't have access to hills. You know, they live in the Midwest, something like that, and they have no choice but to use the step ups or the step mill, or the step stair climber, or the incline treadmill. But it's important to get that kind of work in at this point in the year. So we got to do it, right? Hello, Ruth. Now, another thing that we need to consider, sit, good dog, at this point in the year is tapering. Now, not everybody needs to taper, but if it's the case that you have, you know, a big hunt coming up, we're talking a mountain hunt, we're talking multiple day backpack hunt, you know, a week, 10 days, 14 days, things like that. And if you've trained consistently year round, that's going to be an important thing to do, because fatigue masks fitness. Now, I wrote an article about this. It's in the show notes if you want to go read it. Fatigue masks fitness. So even if you've been steadily making gains and you feel them, you still have a certain aspect of residual fatigue from your training. And so we need to cut that before you get into your hunt. Otherwise, you won't have access to all the aspects of your fitness, and we want all of that fitness to display. And so if you have a big hunt coming up, you've been training consistently, it's important to consider a taper now. Full taper, you're looking at like mostly about 2 weeks, right? So the way you do that is during week 1, you cut your total volume by about 30%. During week 2, you add another 20% and cut it by 50%. So you look at the total of what you're doing now from a conditioning and a strength standpoint, cut it by 30% in week 1, cut it by 50% in week 2, and then that third week would be your hunt week. You don't really need to worry about cutting intensity too much. So volume is really what's going to build the fitness, but also institute most of the fatigue. The intensity will help maintain your fitness. So if you look at it from a standpoint, let's say I'm just giving you a hypothetical, right? So let's say you've been doing most of your conditioning in zone 2. There's no need to then cut your conditioning intensity back to zone 1. You're just going to cut the volume. It's going to help maintain your fitness and allow you to recover. Ruth, sit. Sit. Now. Good dog. It's going to help you to recover. So those are going to be big factors if you really need to have access to your full fitness going on a hunt. Now, if you have an antelope hunt coming up, or you know, you're just going out for a few day hunts or something like that, then you don't need to worry about tapers, because the residual fatigue that you have isn't going to be as displayed. Now, taking a couple of days off, or a day off or two before you go out on a day hunt, not a bad idea. That'll help a lot, but a full taper is not going to be necessary. You can mostly continue to train as normal, take a day or two off, go hunt, maybe and if it's you get into a good one during a day hunt, maybe take a day or two off on the other side, and then you can get back into training as normal. But if you have a big hunt coming up, you're going out for weeks, you know you're going to cover miles, then you need to do the taper. 30% first week, 50% second week, and then you're good to go hunt after that. So there's the overview of how hunters ought to train in August. We're looking at strength endurance, we're looking at muscular endurance. We want specific conditioning, a little peak work, shifting your strength work towards doing unilateral work, and also like kind of those combo movements that you that will help you with your uphill and downhill movement. Now, another thing that we want to consider is mobility, taking care of your ankles. Like, we're going to do some different mobility exercises that simulate ankle rolls and things like that in our training, so that we're prepared for them. Sometimes my dog's stubborn. Stay. Because it's not if you're going to roll your ankle, it's when. Okay, it's gonna happen. I rolled my ankle like 5 times or not 5 times, but a few times in Colorado last month, and no injuries, nothing really happened, but it's because we focus on the specific ankle mobility that transfers over to the things that we do in the mountains, so that our tissues are resilient and our nervous system knows what to do with those positions when we get into them. So again, the article on tapering is in the show notes, and also I have all of our free resources listed in the show notes, from our pack capacity calculator, which is based on our 10-minute step-up test, tells you about where you can safely carry weight right now. We have the Hunter's Field Test, which might be a good idea for you to put yourself through to see where you're at before you go into the mountains right now. How's your summer training gone? We also have the Hunt Hard After 50 free resource for all of you guys that are getting into older ages, want to be able to consistently train, want to stay in the mountains. It's a great guide on managing your training and your lifestyle so you can keep doing the things that you love to do. As always, I appreciate you watching and listening, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks for joining me in my backyard, and for tolerating me yelling at my dog.